Hey everyone, welcome to the Cannabis Technologist. I'm your host, Rob Neely, and with me today we've got a unique interview with Jeff Samuels with AlphaRoot. How you doing today, Jeff?
Hello everybody.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
You're the CEO of AlphaRoot, aren't you?
So I'm the founder and general manager. We actually have two other partners who helped me start the business, and I can actually explain a bit of the backstory there as well, which is essentially Benji Markoff and Carl Nidbala, two co-founders of a company called Founder Shield, which is an insurtech company here in New York. I was the first producer or salesperson, as we say, in the insurance business, and now we're about 40 people or 5 years into the business. So AlphaRoot is a subsidiary of Founder Shield, which I'm the general manager of and responsible for all day-to-day operations with the team.
Excellent. That's a great segue. I wanted to chat a little bit about AlphaRoot. And AlphaRoot is the company kind of front and center here, and you guys specialize in insurance for businesses in the cannabis space. And I thought we'd start there. How and why did you guys decide to take this segment?
Absolutely. So I think our origin story is actually really important here, which is essentially, we saw a huge gap in the marketplace in terms of new age startup businesses, looking at, models like Uber, so on demand, looking at things like drones and software as a service and cannabis, all new age kind of modern risks that the traditional insurance brokerage was not necessarily catering to. And we also felt, just from an age standpoint, if you look at the insurance industry, a lot of the brokers, and I actually saw this stat in a conference last night, the majority of the people in the insurance business are 50 years old and older. And we felt that, for the longevity of this business, these type of products, there's a better way to cater to these modern businesses, to be able to sell an asset to our peers that we felt was valuable in helping many of these early stage startups understand risk, reduce their risk, and ultimately have just a clearer picture of the insurance process. So that's exactly what we did, again, at Founder Shield. Cannabis was one of those niches that we felt strongly enough. This definitely needs to be a specialized industry and a specialized group that focuses on the risks in the cannabis space. Obviously, there are a million different ways that you can attack the cannabis business itself, from the grow side to all the hundreds and thousands of ancillary businesses out there. So really unique and very challenging from an insurance standpoint, but it's something that we felt, being that we were already working with hard-to-place businesses in the general startup realm, cannabis was one area that we kind of started seeing some success in. We actually started working with some ancillary businesses first, which spawned us to take a harder look into the cannabis space. And then me personally, it's something that just growing up in the community that I grew up in the suburbs of New York, I went out to school in Arizona and had a bit of the West Coast taste. It was always cannabis was always something that I felt was underappreciated and misunderstood. So when we saw, places like New York City and New York, the state of New York, pass the Compassionate Care Act, and we had some ancillary business already on the books, we felt that it was really time to double down, build out a specialty, and I was the guy who wanted to step up and really focus on the space itself.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, Jeffrey, I just got back from the Marijuana Business Conference, and I'd spoken to a couple of insurance companies, and there weren't many. But I'm curious, one of the things I learned was the challenges of the underwriting because of legislation, and banks and financial institutions don't want to touch cannabis. So how does AlphaRoot handle the underwriting aspect with all the challenges that exist in cannabis?
Absolutely. So certainly tricky. And just to be clear and make sure everybody has a good understanding of what we do, we are, as they say in the business, a retail brokerage. So we represent the clients on the business side, and we also represent markets and carriers. So largely in the cannabis space, from an insurance underwriting standpoint, we're not necessarily the ones that are doing the underwriting. We work with carrier partners to do that. In terms of finding good carrier partners to do so, certainly challenging. There's a couple of strong wholesale markets out there, but not many. So you have NextWave, who does a good job of taking policies and catering to the industry. Canister is another name. So something that we've done to help some of the larger carriers feel a little bit more comfortable with the space and just add some more products to the market is starting to have calls with larger admitted carriers, educating them on the risks of cannabis, what some of the products and programs should look like. So again, we're pushing for more access to more markets, access to new products. But essentially, it's largely wholesale markets, which means they're non-admitted carriers. Non-admitted means that if they become insolvent in whatever state these insurance carriers are operating in, the state is not going to back them. But that also gives them the flexibility to write a little bit more hard-to-place business, and also some of some of the businesses that are seen to be in a gray area, which I guess would be cannabis. So again, the big thing is the majority of the underwriters are non-admitted. They're wholesale markets. They have a little bit more flexibility in terms of what they're putting out. Certainly, the legality is always an issue, and often that comes back in the form of exclusions and endorsements and policies. So something that we're constantly working on. So we're confident that that's going to continue to improve, but again, largely non-admitted wholesale markets.
Gotcha. And I'm curious with which this is a great segue into complexity and running a cannabis business in the States. Let's talk about some of the things that the average business may come up against that they don't account for, given the degree of ignorance out there.
Sure. I think, obviously there's a lot of complexity that often is seen in the application process. So I think it's actually, the applications have been getting more difficult and more stringent. And as new states come online and offer, the ability and the opportunity for people to apply for various licenses, I think it's a positive thing, seeing all of the criteria they're looking for. From the insurance standpoint, things that I think could be helpful, really just on the simplest level, things as easy as employee handbooks. How do you deal with your employees? What is the ethos of the business? What are the ways that employees should be operating and interacting with each other as well as clients? That largely plays into things like employment practices, liability, and a lot of the stuff that we're all hearing in the news about sexual harassment and all of these kind of stories. I think having something as simple as an employee handbook allows businesses and founders of those businesses to set the standard, set kind of the tone for how they want employees to operate and interact. So I think that's an important thing that I often see clients kind of miss in the formation of their business. From the growth side, from looking at facilities and things like that, obviously anything you can do to reduce the dangers of using things like an extraction machine or on the growth side, obviously there's a lot of machinery in the facilities. So again, just making sure that from an overview standpoint, everybody has clear understandings of how the machines operate, who is responsible to utilize them, what are the best practices if there is an issue with the machinery in terms of having people that can perform maintenance and troubleshooting them and making sure that everybody's safe. Which again, I think, the biggest thing and something that when I saw this question largely popped into my mind was employee handbook, and really just a handbook for the business in general to create those safety procedures, not only with employee interactions, but also around the facilities and around the equipment.
Okay. And that sounds like that's something that would apply to a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
But in cannabis, well, for example, on a state and a federal level, does a cannabis business have to? Is there a mandatory requirement to have certain insurances in place that's unique to cannabis,
Sure.
or is it kind of the same across the board?
Sure. So very good question. So again, looking at the applications that are coming out, they're starting to require general liability, property, product liability, or not everybody is requiring product liability, but essentially they're looking for basic general liability and property coverage. Anybody who's operating a business and has an office space and especially a warehouse, this is common stuff. So it's actually not specific to cannabis. And the bigger question or problem, things like crop insurance, that's still largely being negotiated and kind of improved and molded. So that's not even something that's readily available to the entire market. You can still get it. But again, largely it's a general liability and property policy they're requesting in the application. It's something that is ubiquitous and that pretty much any business that's operating should have that sort of policy in place. It's probably the most basic tenet, followed by, workers' compensation to make sure that obviously employees in the facilities are safe. And workers' comp is also a state-mandated insurance coverage, so that's something that is always relevant regardless of the business.
Okay. So when you've been in this space for how many years now in cannabis at AlphaRoot?
So we've been doing this for 3 years in the cannabis space.
And when you're working with clients and partners, obviously you're taking kind of a relationship aspect to it. What are the things that come up the most that businesses fail to realize that you have to do a lot of education on in cannabis?
Sure. Product liability is a big one that keeps coming up. It's something that, as precedent is being set in legal cases in terms of product liability and the way that people consume them. And, cases like, there was something that was ongoing in Denver, I believe, for a child ate an edible. So it's really looking at the risk transfer around product liability. So largely we're having conversations with kind of everybody in that chain of events where we want to make sure the dispensaries have product liability. Obviously, they're the ones selling to the end consumer, but also the cultivators, manufacturers, the wholesalers, pretty much anybody who's touching the product at some point. So that's a big one that's coming up. Again, crop coverage, as I mentioned before, which has been an interesting topic because of the fires in California. And it's going to happen again, unfortunately, the conversation. But, I think it's important to talk about this topic because it's industry specific, although, it's agriculture. Crop insurance, I think after the fires in the Emerald Triangle and Northern California, largely, it seemed like the media was reporting that that coverage is not available, which is incorrect. Crop coverage is available for indoor grows, so anybody who's inside a facility can certainly insure the crop, but also you have to be a licensed operator. So a lot of the trouble that the people in California who were not able to make insurance claims or had no insurance on their facility or their crop, they were yet to be licensed cannabis businesses. So, it created that kind of gray area for other states and other people who, have the right licenses and are legally allowed to grow and sell in their state. Crop insurance is certainly available indoors, and it's something that, there's definitely been an uptick in the last couple of months since the fires, and people are more and more interested about that.
Okay. Now you have packages in grow and sell and scaling, variety of aspects in the cannabis space, but you also offer conventional coverage as well. And I'm curious with AlphaRoot offering, packages on the conventional side, what is it you guys are able to offer that the average insurance company out there that can't? For example, health insurance.
Sure.
How are you able to cross? What else are you able to cross over on insurance packages beyond cannabis?
Absolutely. So, largely we're looking at what are the risks of a cannabis business and how can we help protect them, not just from the business standpoint, but also from the employee standpoint. So that's largely where our health and benefits team comes into play, which was certainly been an important piece of us building out our business. So that's as simple as offering your trimmers, your growers, your people who are the hands and feet on the ground in the field or in that greenhouse, warehouse, that working on the day-to-day. It was really a need that was kind of brought to us from the company owners, the founders, and the entrepreneurs who were starting these businesses and wanted to provide benefits to their employees. So again, this is obviously ubiquitous to any business that has people on payroll. Offering health and benefits is something that is something that I think is obviously, again, ubiquitous for all businesses. At the same time, it solidifies that with cannabis and the amount of jobs the industry has been able to produce, taking care of our employees and making sure that people have access to health and benefits plans and 401ks and all the things that you would as an employee of any other business, that was super important to us. So that's why we started looking into health and benefits and put out those products. In terms of the grow, sell, scale packages, that largely to us breaks down how we view the industry. So grow, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but anybody on the plant touching side is basically how we categorize grow. On the sell side, we're looking at a lot of the ancillary businesses. So, the people in the seed to sale space, a lot of the software guys out there who are either marketing platforms or, utilizing some sort of technology to put products in front of consumers. So not just, selling through a dispensary, but selling through technology, which is, a large part of our portfolio. And then on the scale side, similar concept, a lot of ancillary in there, but also looking at how do we offer services to the investors in the space. So on the scale side, we see that as people funding businesses, which largely helps them reinvest and scale their companies. So we've been able to put together products that we're selling to venture capital funds that have large portfolios of cannabis investments. So on the scale side, we're looking at protecting the investment, protecting the investors. So again, those packages are really made to break down and generally categorize the industry, if you will, and what sort of insurance would be relevant for them.
Okay. Very customized then. Very interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Now, let me take a harder play here. Do you have examples? For example, I'm sure there's a contingent out there in the market that says, hey, this is great, Jeffrey. We'd all like to have the best insurance, but I really can't afford it. I can't afford these kinds of packages. Do you have some bad case scenarios where businesses have taken that tack and regretted it later? What are some of the worst case scenarios you've seen in the market where you could come in with a feasible package that would have saved them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. And I'm sure there are definitely a couple isolated incidents, but largely I think the question for a lot of the founders as they're getting up and running and whether they're bootstrapped and utilizing their own money and assets or raising capital, which a lot of the larger grows, you have to bring outside capital for that. But on the guys who are bootstrapped and really, in markets like, again, Northern California, some of the old school growers and sellers, but also the Pacific Northwest, where the markets are a little bit smaller, a lot of the people want to self-insure because they don't want to pay, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in year one on insurance. So things just as, again, basic as having general liability for their facility, which goes into product liability, that stuff can be largely detrimental if there's any claims whatsoever.
Right.
A real issue and a real claim that I've seen with one of my clients is a business that is on the ancillary side of things, and similar to what I was relating to earlier, which was having an employee handbook, and they essentially opted out of employment practices liability, and they had an issue with disgruntled employees who ended up leaving the company, suing the founders, and basically causing a big headache. Had they, purchased that policy, largely that headache would have gone away. And even furthermore, the company now is wound down. So, I think issues like that and kind of missing quintessential pieces where maybe it's an upfront investment of a couple $1,000, and certainly understand everybody wants to be able to have work and utilize their capital and then spread that as far as they can. Insurance is not the sexiest or the first thing they think about, but this specific client missing that coverage probably cost them $250,000 in legal fees and claims payout. And then furthermore, I don't even know what the repercussions were. But again, now that founding team is dissolved. So I think this actually ended up causing a lot of problems for the business. So thinking about, again, just the basics and making sure that, you're thinking about insurance as an asset and something that, it's certainly there for a rainy day. But in this day and age, with all the stuff that's going on in our world, after you make such a significant investment in applying for a license, going through the time and the blood, sweat, and tears to get a facility or any business up and running, and then not purchasing something to protect that business, that's really where we're trying to have the conversation, educate, people in the cannabis space. We understand the connotation of insurance, but at the end of the day, we also understand and respect how much work and how much money you put into this business, and we want to provide solutions that protect these businesses.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's a high risk, high reward kind of environment, yep. and there's a lot of turbulence out there, given that it's such an emerging space. So it's really interesting to hear that thoughtful answer like that. And let me get you to reflect on kind of a 30,000-foot view. This is a changing space. Legislation's going to change. It's going to continue to deregulate, or you can pick the words, but it's going to become, the market's going to just get larger and larger. And as cannabis becomes more legal, right now it's kind of a nuanced space. But as that grows, do you think insurance will stay segmented the way it is now, or will everyone be jumping into the pool and you'll be competing with the State Farms of the world? Is there going to be room for specialization?
Another great question. As this was my third year going to MJ Business Year. Every year I've seen more and more insurance companies. I sit on the NTIA Finance and Insurance Committee. There's a ton of awesome, friends, but also competitors who we work together and collaborate together. So certainly more people entering, which I think shows that it's obviously a good market. From the product side and from really the carrier side, when you think about, the AIGs of the world, the Hartfords, the State Farms, the Geicos, I think they would have blinders on if they're not thinking about this space. The problem with those sort of carriers and those companies, those who are public anyway, because of the federal status, that causes a problem and obviously a barrier to entry for them to be able to offer products in the space. So as the industry grows and as laws and legislation changes, I think that will also change. Already today on the brokerage side, the biggest brokerages are Aon, Marsh, Willis. Those guys are also looking at cannabis. So, insurance is certainly thinking about the space. For us, it's just really our ethos and our mentality. We believe that people who are specialized because it's such a tricky and such a complicated industry with all the different state laws and regulations and all the different aspects of the business. You really have to be solely focused on the industry. So that's where we believe we're going to succeed. We also have technology that allows us to operate in a more seamless fashion, which is a big piece that I think a lot of the other competitors will be missing. But largely, I think we'll have more options as the industry, starts opening up on regulations. No, it's not a video. And I think, more brokerages and more carriers are going to continue to enter the market, just based on what's going on. I think also thinking about internationally, that's also a huge thing. So maybe we'll start seeing carriers from overseas, such as the Lloyd's of London's of the world, who historically said they are not interested in writing in the cannabis space. It seems like their attitude has changed as of late. So I think some international markets will actually jump back into the space and start quoting and being just a piece of the insurance and cannabis business again in the near future.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. Let's talk about the biggest challenge when you're working in cannabis and insurance. If I gave you kind of a magic wand, Jeff, and you could use it on one thing you'd like to change that would make your life easier in insuring packages for cannabis businesses, what would it be? What would you like to see?
Sure. More products. Really, I would love to see more carriers and more products out there in the market. That allows me to put out better pricing, better, just holistic programs for my clients.
Okay.
And largely today, a lot of the brokerages who are operating the space are working off of speed, which is not really a great way to operate. The clients needed the policies yesterday, so it's often because there are only 2 or 3 I think it's because the market's so restrictive, and there's again only 2 or 3 markets that are truly able to quote this stuff and quote it well.
Okay.
It really often makes the first brokerage to be able to talk to the client the one who's able to get the quotes and ultimately win that deal, where it really should be the one who understands the risk the best, the one who understands the client. Pricing's always important, but it's really making sure you know the client, you have the relationship, and you've done everything you can to put out the best possible coverage and not just speed to market and the best price.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And yet it gives you the opportunity to just be, by being really good and thorough and offering competitive packages in that sense, is the long-term play.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
What does the future look like
largely
for AlphaRoot? I'm sorry, go ahead. You had another end.
No, this is a perfect segue. So I'll jump in here if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
So I guess future of AlphaRoot, we're a New York City-based company, which certainly has its benefits, but also challenges. So we're looking at expanding the team to the West Coast and opening offices in California and adding team members, pretty much all over the country. So I think you'll see us grow from an employee standpoint, looking at integrating deeper into a lot of the compliance software that's out there. A lot of these conversations that have been happening for the past year or so, but, I think we'll see them come into fruition in 2018, but making sure that, things such as lab testing and having satisfactory lab testing results, for example, equates to you having a reduction in your overall premium, working on things like that where it's not just insurance products that we're selling, but ultimately we're able to help with a more holistic risk solution that plugs into a lot of the other players in the space. So I largely see compliance as kind of the phrase, and a lot of those innovative new technologies that are coming out there to attack and also streamline the process of compliance in cannabis. We're looking to partner and kind of jump in to the business in that arena as well.
Awesome. Jeff, this is a great conversation. Really appreciate it. I actually learned a lot in just our 25 minutes together.
Appreciate it.
And I wanted to direct our viewers, if they wanted to come find you or look up AlphaRoot, how would you direct them?
Absolutely. So you can find us on the web at alpharoot.co.co, info@alpharoot.co. You can always give me a shout also. I'm definitely a big fan of LinkedIn, so please reach out to me, Jeffrey Samuels. You can email me at jeff@alpharoot.co as well. So yeah, would absolutely love to get in touch with anybody in the business. Insurance is certainly my day-to-day, my primary goal and function in this space, but there's so many opportunities and so many different things going on. I just love connecting with people and learning about their businesses. So it doesn't have to be an insurance discussion. If you're interested in what we're doing, or you're on the East Coast and want to connect, would absolutely love to speak to you.
Excellent. Really appreciate it, Jeff. Let's try to do this again sometime. You're obviously well-knowledged in this space, and I can tell you've got a lot to offer.
Much appreciated, Rob.
That was it, everyone. See you next time.